This is an I Dream of Words short. Today we're going to be talking about an English idiom. See eye to eye. When you see eye to eye with someone, you are in agreement about a subject and treating each other as equals. If you agree with someone, but there is a power imbalance, or if you are equals in terms of power but don't agree, you're not seeing eye to eye. Both conditions have to be met for it to work. Let's take a look at an example. Hey, what did you think of what I said in class? I had my doubts, but I think you convinced me. No more questions? None left. We totally see eye to eye on this one. Awesome. In this example, A and B didn't used to agree. We can assume they're both students and probably see each other as relatively equal socially. After A talked about something in class, B agrees. Now they see eye to eye. In a language that developed in a culture with such huge variations in height and social class, having an expression based on being able to look directly into someone's eyes and agree is no real surprise. In English-speaking cultures and Western culture in general, physical size and strength is of incredible importance and has historically always been so. If you are smaller, or female, your opinion didn't matter because the only way to be heard was to do it by force. Small people, while not always weaker for sure, are usually expected to be. Smaller people usually have smaller muscles and therefore less physical strength. Western culture is mostly a hierarchy of physical violence, and much of the language developed there, especially English, has its roots in the culture of male-dominated fighting. It's important to remember that this isn't a warrior culture. This fighting was not about honor or protecting the weak the way you might expect from Japanese, Korean, or Chinese culture. It was not particularly tribal. This was about a man asserting a right to dominance by brute force. The closest modern equivalent outside the Western world would be how a bully dominates other children on a playground, or how a gang leader uses violence and aggression to control a neighborhood by fear and intimidation. So seeing eye to eye is a tradition of mutual respect between those who are at the same level of strength. Having the same goals and views is perhaps the most important function of a language. Waving your arms and making unintelligible noises is perfectly fine when trying to communicate a warning. You can teach someone how to use a tool by demonstration and mimicry. You can show love or hatred by physical gesture and behavioral cues. Language is more about agreement and disagreement than communication of eminently important information in many ways. People have an inherent sense of who is higher or lower on a social ladder. Historically, the rich have been higher on that ladder. Men have been on the ladder, while women stand at the bottom. Realistically, women were on a different ladder, far lower, where they were below the men but hierarchical within their own gender role, the rich, and sometimes the educated, above the poor. So being at the same social level was vitally important. What did it matter if someone far below your importance agreed or disagreed? If someone with far more power disagreed, that would be equally irrelevant, because they'd do whatever they wanted and your agreement would be unnecessary for them. The fact that you had an opinion at all in this case would be unwelcome and useless. For agreement to matter, you had to be on the same rung of the societal ladder. This is relatively common across cultures everywhere in human society, actually. What is generally specific to Western cultures, though, is the other piece, what can be understood as a culture of bullying. If someone of your social status didn't agree with you, you had three options. You could change their mind, they could change your mind, or you could agree to disagree. Most of this was going to be accomplished by force, though, or at least the threat of force. If the other person didn't agree and was weaker than you would beat them into agreement. The opposite was just as likely to occur. Agreeing to disagree was seen as weak and usually something only women did. A typical English speaker would never leave something alone. They wouldn't be happy until there was a consensus, and force was no problem at all. Convincing someone with words was undesirable if it could be accomplished by violence, because violence demonstrates power and words demonstrate a lack of willingness to fight, usually seen as weakness. While this has become more subtle today, it is important to remember that this is still the culture of most of the English-speaking world, and this expression serves as a great entry to that way of thinking. Of course, we don't talk much about physical strength and social status anymore. It's still there in people's minds, but it's not as acceptable to mention it in public. But whenever you agree on something with someone, you can still say that you see eye to eye, even if they're smaller or larger, even if they're your teacher. The expression is far more flexible now, so next time you find yourself in agreement with one of your friends, you can look them in the face and say that you now see eye to eye. Thanks for taking the time to join me here today for an I Dream of Words short. See you next time.